Hi first grade readers, this week in reading we are going to be working on retelling. When we retell a story, we want to think about the big important parts in the book so that we could tell someone about the book and whether or not we recommended the book to them. So we're going to finish up the story Mercy Watson Goes for a Ride. We've been reading that for several weeks now, and then we'll practice retelling it together. One way to practice retelling a story is to use the fingers on your hand. Every time you tell a part of your story, you can put out a new finger. You would start with the characters, then the setting, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Whether we use the fingers on our hands or we use a graphic organizer like this one, we're looking for the same elements in a story. We're looking at who are the characters, where does the story take place, what happened in the beginning of the story, what happened in the middle of the story, that was the big exciting part, and how did the story end? How was the problem solved? As we get ready to read the end of Mercy Watson Goes for a Ride, remember I'm going to think about the characters, the setting, the beginning, middle, and end. And using my fingers will help me remember all the big important parts of the story. Chapter 12. The car screeched, the car shuddered. The car careened, the car caroomed, and finally the car stopped. Mercy was very surprised. Suddenly, she was not driving the car. Suddenly, she was not even in the car. Suddenly, Mercy was airborne. Mr. Watson was wearing his seatbelt. He did not fly out of the car. Baby Lincoln was wearing her seatbelt. She did not fly out of the car. Officer Tomalello was safe in his police cruiser. He did not fly out of his car. Only Mercy flew. "Oh dear," said Baby. "It's an emergency," shouted Mr. Watson. "Alert the fire department." "Was that pig wearing a seatbelt?" Officer Tomalello asked. "No," he answered himself. "That pig most certainly was not." "Have laws been broken here?" asked Officer Tomalello. "Most certainly, most definitely. Laws have been broken here." Mr. Watson and Baby Lincoln and Officer Tomalello watched Mercy fly. They watched her land. Oof! Mr. Watson got out of the car. He ran to Mercy. He wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. "My darling, my dear," he said, "please tell me that you are all right." "Oink," said Mercy. She snuffled Mr. Watson's neck. "Hooray," said Baby, "she is fine." "Oh, thank you," said Mr. Watson. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." He bent his head and covered the tips of Mercy's ears with kisses. "You are a miracle, a prodigy, a dear," Mr. Watson said. "You are a porcine wonder. But even porcine wonders cannot drive. In fact, porcine wonders should never be allowed to drive. Ever." Mercy sighed. She was glad the ride was over. She felt a tiny bit dizzy and a little bit dazed. She wanted very much to go home. Chapter 13. Eugenia Lincoln and Mrs. Watson stood together on the Watsons' front porch. They watched a police cruiser pull into the driveway. Mr. Watson and Mercy and Baby Lincoln were all in the back seat. "As I suspected," said Eugenia, "trouble, folly, and that pig is right in the middle of it." "Oh," said Mrs. Watson, "my darlings, my dears." She ran out to the police car. "I am so glad that you are home. The toast was starting to get cold." Mr. Watson and Baby Lincoln got out of the car. "We have had something of an adventure, Mrs. Watson," Mr. Watson said. "Yes," said Baby. "We have had an adventure, sister." "Folly," replied Eugenia Lincoln. "Yes," agreed Baby Lincoln happily. "Folly." "Laws have been broken," said Officer Tomalello. "Pig!" shouted Eugenia. "Excuse me?" said Officer Tomalello. "It's all that pig's fault," said Eugenia. She pointed at Mercy. Mercy climbed out of the car. She put her nose up in the air. She sniffed. Could it be? Yes, it was. Toast with a great deal of butter on it. What could be better? Chapter 14. Laws have been broken, said Officer Tomalello. Tickets must be written. Officer, do you like toast? Mrs. Watson asked. Toast? Said Officer Tomalello. Do I like toast? Why, yes, I do. I do like toast. Why don't you come inside and have some? Asked Mrs. Watson. Why don't I come inside and have some toast? Asked Officer Tomalello. Said Officer Tomalello. I can't think of a reason not to. Lovely, said Mrs. Watson. She clapped her hands together. Right this way. What nonsense, grumbled Eugenia Lincoln. Toast is not the answer. No, sister, said baby Lincoln, but it does smell heavenly. She took hold of Eugenia's hand. Well, said Eugenia, it has been expertly buttered. And so that Saturday, Officer Tomalello and Eugenia Lincoln and baby Lincoln and Mr. and Mrs. Watson and Mercy Watson all sat around the table together and ate hot buttered toast. Did Mercy Watson have extra helpings? She did. And so did Officer Tomalello. I hope you really enjoyed Mercy Watson Goes for a Ride. Now what we're going to do is we're going to practice retelling the story together. I'm going to think about who the story was about and where it takes place. The story is about Mercy Watson, and it takes place mostly in the Watsons' car. They went on an adventure together. Now let's think about the big important parts of the story. In the beginning, Mr. Watson and Mercy went for a drive in their car on a Saturday afternoon. It turns out that baby Lincoln snuck into the car, and then Mercy took over driving the car. Once the car stopped and they finally realized that everyone was safe, they all went back to the Watsons' house and enjoyed hot buttered toast together. This week, you're going to practice using the 5-finger retell to retell the big important parts in your books that you're reading on Raz and Epic and books that you're reading at home. Have a great week, boys and girls.